My name is Martha Wilmore. My mother was Martha Johnson. And my father, he was Wilmore and Green. And I was born here in Santo Domingo, here in Samaná, in this place called Barrio Wilmore. I am of the fourth generation of the Afro-Americans that came in the 1824 to Samaná. They came from different parts of the United States, but they all left out from Philadelphia in different groups. Some landed in the capital. A group landed in Puerto Plata. And more than one group came to Samaná. Between all the groups, there were more than 6,000. Bishop Richard Allen set out those groups. They were invited by Boyer, which was the president then of Haiti. They offered them, when they came here, that they'd give them equal rights, give them land, but they would give of their culture and civilization to the people here in Santo Domingo.
My name is Jose Francisco Wilmore. They call me Franklin. And my parents were Reverend Maya Wilmore and Mrs. Elmina Wilmore. They had 4 children, born and raised in Samaná. In 1824, they migrated to this country, and it was an English-speaking language that they brought. And the people, the families settled in Samaná. They tried to keep together and keep the language. And principally my father, he liked, and he reads and writes English well, and he struggled for us to learn English. They settled here in Samaná in different places, and they tried to keep up the English language all the time.
How? Through school, through church? Explain to us.
In church, in school, in the neighborhood. For a long time they kept together. And most of them was farmers, they were sailors, and they made a farm together all the time.
The group that came to Santo Domingo, they had a good invitation. They felt happy. They gave them land, but many of them didn't feel satisfied because they didn't, in that time, then it was plenty Haitians that lived in the capital of Santo Domingo. So they didn't like the custom, the culture of the Haitian.
The domination of the Haitian had a big conflict in terms that they closed down many of the schools and universities, and it was a real problem for most of the people. We did not get along together with the Haitians because they had a different custom for us.
They didn't want to mix because they didn't agree like with the certain customs of the people that was here. You know, they had Christian culture. They were Roman Catholics, but they only believed in the Virgin Mary, and that Christ so far and no Father. So they wanted their children to remain being Christian people, having Christian education, Christian custom that they carry custom to the children and for their morality, and to know that God was their father and only in him that they should believe. That was their way of thinking.
They settled in different places like Los Algarrobos, Juana Vicenta, Palmarito, Honduras, Villa Clara, and so forth.
So many went back, but many of them remained, and most of the group of Santo Domingo that got dementia was because they got typhus fever, and plenty of them died. The rest, they remained. They gave them a church, wait for it to wash up. They had the school. They came along, and they kept together. And the group that came, the group that came to Samaná, they were the one that more prospered. And some would come from Haiti and come to, of the ones that came from United States to Haiti, they didn't feel so happy, but the ones of Samaná felt happy because they kept together with the people from here. They had Dominican people, but they had plenty what was a descendant of French people that came here to Samaná. And they kept together, and they would help the groups that came because they was established here already. So when they came, they found who to help them until they began to produce and build their boats and sail, even though many of them, the ones that came, some of them that came, they came with their boats and they remained. They came with their groups, together with the children and the things.
Really crazy. We've been doing quite a bit of research on slavery in New Orleans. It's been documented that more enslaved Africans, let me correct myself, more enslaved Africans were sold in New Orleans than anywhere else in the United States. So all this time, I knew that this house was the site of a former slave pen, but then today learned that this entire block from Esplanade and Charters all the way down the street to this next corner, which is Carolec and Charters, was a slave pen. It was the site where Solomon Northup was kidnapped from. He was a free black man of color. His story told in the movie 12 Years a Slave. Yeah, this shit just blew my mind. Like, all this time I'm thinking it was just his house. Nope. It was the whole fucking block. The whole block. I can only imagine what that was like. It's always been fascinating to me. New Orleans, obviously incredibly fascinating, and being from here. But that there were free people of color and enslaved people of color seemingly in the same area, obviously. When I read the sign, I was like, and it said it extended from Charters and Esplanade to Carolec. I was like, where's Carolec? Right here on this corner. We were headed to this bookstore over here on the corner of Frenchman. So, yeah, all of this was the slave pen, an entire block of, we can only possibly imagine, slave trading, I'm sure quite a bit of brutality, free people of color being kidnapped and enslaved on plantations. Yeah, shit is wild.
Greetings, 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 divine, all blessed, peace and love, joy and prosperity to you and yours. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes, powered, produced, promoted, sponsored, and supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. We continue to invite you to join us and support us in this endeavor, this third annual New Orleans International Voodoo Day. We believe by embracing the spirit, tradition, and community of voodoo, we aim to create a more just, equitable, and enchanting world. Contribute to a world where voodoo and African diasporic spiritual traditions are celebrated, respected, and integrated into the fabric of society, fostering spiritual growth and wellness, cultural understanding and exchange, community empowerment and social justice, artistic expression and innovation, and intergenerational knowledge, sharing, and preservation. Again, New Orleans International Voodoo Day serves as a beacon for voodoo practitioners, artists, enthusiasts, connecting us to our ancestors, our heritage, and to each other. Through our collective efforts, we aim to revitalize and promote voodoo traditions in New Orleans and beyond, create a vibrant, inclusive, and supportive community, inspire personal transformation, creativity, and social change, to honor the past, embrace the present, and to manifest a brighter future. Please visit us and join us at www.vodouday.org, www.voodooday.org. V like Victor, O, D like David, O, U, D like David, A-Y, voodooday.org for more continued updates and information about this powerful and historic event. And we're certainly grateful for your continued love, support, participations, offerings as it relates to this 9 p.m. Central Standard Time podcast. We certainly appreciate your continued support and visitation here with us. I will be unmuting my first priest, my wild man, my right-hand man, Joshua Nylan Tanner, momentarily, the beloved Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val Martinez, and then Elder Reggie, known on this platform as Green Soap, Shrine of the White Cloth. I will be unmuting you momentarily. I want to introduce a new topic, but along the same subject matter. Madison Historical Review, Savages and Sable Subjects, White Fear, Racism, and the Demonization of New Orleans Voodoo in the 19th century. We've clearly demonstrated the footprint, if you will, of the practice of voodoo, root work, conjure, traditional, Aboriginal, African, and indigenous-based practices and traditions in the so-called New World, and particularly as a impetus to revolution, revolt, uprising, fighting for justice, fighting for rights, if you will. We certainly appreciate all the love and support we've received for our newly unveiled 1866 Freedmen's March, which again highlights a moment when we were fed up and weren't taking anymore and decided to make a public demonstration. This paper examines the dimensions of white New Orleanians' mischaracterizations of voodoo, both as an idealized racist designation and nomenclature of Haitian voodoo, and a representation of the hypersexualized, savage African who engaged in evil, harmful magic like witchcraft and devil worship. I've in recent podcasts demonstrated again the footprint of root work and conjure, but more specifically, root medicine. Uh, to not separate it, if you will, from conjure and other forms of sorcery, but to highlight its relevance and its importance in demonstration within Southern culture as a means for healing, well being, and how it continued to feed the Black codes, the Jim Crow era, and the continued uh, white supremacist and racist environment that we were forced to live under, witness in commercial advertisements, pop culture, etc., and even in religious spaces, and the continued demonization of ATR, again, in a direct response to its ability to empower us, to motivate us to action. This antagonistic reinterpretation emerged in the early 19th century and reoriented voodoo as threatening the dominant system of slaveocracy. Central to white trepidations was the assumption that voodoo, VODOU, and VOODOO would inspire slave uprisings, much like VODOU, voodoo, had in St. Domingo. My central argument is that the demonization of voodoo in late antebellum New Orleans had far less to do with pious devotion, but instead was exclusively built upon the exploitative anxieties harbored by the United States, particularly, and white New Orleans specifically. These forebodings would echo the dread of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and would be widely shared by white slaveholders in Louisiana. Thus, as voodoo existed with New Orleans Creole culture throughout the 19th century, so too would its objectified image among white New Orleanians. Before continuing, it is important again to identify the differences between Saint Domingo and Haiti and voodoo, VODOU, and VOODOO for context. Prior to 1804, the Caribbean island, most known as Haiti, was referred to as Saint Domingo, originally called Española or Hispaniola, Little Spain. Upon the invasion of Christopher Columbus, its name was changed to Saint Domingo in 1697 when the French Empire seized control of Hispaniola from the Spanish. And once the Haitian Revolution ended in January 1804, the country's name officially changed to Haiti, where it remains as such today. VODOU, voodoo, sometimes referred to as Voudon, VODUN, when indicating its position as an African diasporic religion, derived from the Fon or Fon Nu Agadja people of southern Dahomey, modern day Benin, and represents spirit, God, or image in white African in West African spirituality. Voudon is the conceptualization of the person to the world, as one Haitian intellectual explained. Voodoo, VOODOO, conversely, is a term of condemnation, a divisive placeholder of white New Orleanians' racist ideologies of enslaved men and women of African descent in the late antebellum period. Voodoo is, as one historian suggested, an inexact connotation whose likelihood from extraction from the lexicon of American folklore is relatively small. And moreover, voodoo is a term many historians and anthropologists reject. While scholar Leslie Desmangelis described voodoo as an inextricable part of Haitian life, he identified voodoo as a distortion of the Dahomean or Benoit word for voodoo, V-O-D-U, meaning God or spirit. And while honoring the correct term of VODOU, this paper will use the American phrase VOODOO to connote its racially provocative theme. Voodoo, VODOU, then will be used in relation to Santo Domingo, Haiti references within the body of this document. In all other descriptions, voodoo with 4 O's will be otherwise used. And this, I feel, is in keeping with the language of the time and does not indicate my support for its continued usage unless within a frame of historical insight, not contemporary distortions. An extension of West African Aja tradition, voodoo, and its substratum voodoo culture is a complex system within Haitian spirit theology, whose primary deity, Bon Di, or God, and multitudinous collective of spirits, or Orisha, or Loa, symbolize the clairvoyant reality and human connection to the external world. Enslaved men and women of African descent in the Americas believed the physical and divine elements were interconnected and acted in concert to each other. The sacredness of voodoo was an indispensable, irrefutable function of their connection to time, space, and history. Time offered the transcendence of the now. To conceive of time, according to Laurenti Magessa, was to understand it in a cyclic and phenomenal way. Space occupied the physical land for which they were stolen, a place which they could never return. Yet it also functioned as anchors to the spiritual margins between the living and the living dead, ancestors who were indeed not dead, but were everywhere, in the thickening shadow, in the trees that rustle, in the wood that groans, in the breast of the woman, in the child who is wailing, in the firebrand that flames, in the forest, in the house. Those who worshiped the voodoo supreme god Bon Di believed he was the creator of all humankind. Their homes or birth space were therefore sacred, stitching each person into the natural world so closely as to share in the actual livingness of animals, trees, rocks, and rivers. The external world intersected with the shadow of the body, represented as Yi. Objects, beings, events, and facts engage with the external light segment of the shadow, known as the Yi Gaga. Its separate physical life consciousness, Yi Gil, and metaphysical dimensions. Practitioners, worshipers experience dreams and visions from Orisha, Loa, and engaged in veneration, communion with ancestors through multiple forms of rituals bestowed upon the Loa. Borrowed lexeme from the Yoruba language for Lord, or Oluwa. Space was such a sacred extension of the person that to remove Africans by force from their land was a great injustice. And as the African ritual of initiation between the Aja Fan was carried across the Atlantic on slave vessels and supplanted within Afro-Atlantic religions in the Caribbean, Haitian voodoo, like Cuban Santeria, Brazilian Candomblé, and Jamaican and Barbadian Obia, became targets of scorn among white Christian missionaries in slave societies. Missionaries working to erase African paganism were also determined to affirm the inferiority of Blacks and thus justified their repressive attitudes towards them. Haitian voodoo, however, remained tethered to West African indigenous religious uniformity in cosmology. Voodoo, with four O's, in New Orleans, however, became the manufactured identification of slave devil worship in the Christian mind. While there are numerous spellings of VODOU or VOODOO, some of which exposed the depths of white racism in the 18th and 19th centuries, for the purpose of this work, I will alternate between the more well known VODOU and VOODOO when discussing Saint Domingo, Haiti, and New Orleans, respectively. And truly, there are no outstanding differences between VODOU and Voodoo with four O's, aside from the subtle cultural and locational variances. Indeed, any dissimilarities which emerged between the two were only composites of the exploitations and complete misunderstandings of voodoo in the United States, including, but certainly not limited to, contemporary usage of charms, stones, and voodoo dolls. The persistent vilification of voodoo, then, is a result of hundreds of years of racial stereotypes. In contemporary Western societies, all non Christian religions are observed with a dose of skepticism, primarily due to the monotheistic and patriarchal worldview of religion and nationalism. Voodoo was and remains in Africa. Voodoo was always present in New Orleans from the moment the first enslaved Africans were transported from Dahomey, the Congo, and other areas in West and Central Africa. While colonial Christian dogma ordained and justified slavery, none more than the Catholic Church, the interconnectedness of voodoo culture with Afro Catholicism presented an opportunity for Christians in New Orleans to reorient voodoo, VODOU, as voodoo with four O's. This sardonic nomenclature of Haitian voodoo did more than respell its name, however. It also reinvested in anti Black rhetoric while directly leveraging white New Orleans contempt for the newly arrived Saint Domingo refugees. And moreover, sensationalized tales of VAU DOUX, voodoo priest and priestess, engaging in blood and cannibalistic sacrifices on the eve of the Haitian Revolution put many white New Orleanians in states of total panic, believing the Haitian rebels were sending, quote, the most warlike to Louisiana, unquote. So from Saint Dominique to, or Saint Domingo to New Orleans with blood on March 24, 1791, Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson confided in a letter to his eldest child that Saint Dominique and Martinique are involved in a horrid civil war. Nothing can be more distressing than the situation of the inhabitants, as their slaves have been called into action and are a terrible engine, absolutely ungovernable. An army and fleet from France are expected every hour to quell the disorders. Months later, Jefferson lamented to his third cousin, Thomas Mann Rudolph, in a letter dated August 7th, that the French colony had dissolved into a state of utter chaos. Quote, a decree of the National Assembly of France giving the rights of citizenship to the free people of color of Saint Domingo has thrown the colony into a dangerous fermentation, unquote. Exactly 1 month later, on September 8th, Sylvanus Barnstable, Massachusetts merchant sent an urgent message to Jefferson about the carnage inside Saint Domingo. A new and alarming catastrophe hath assailed this devoted island. An insurrection among the Negroes took place at Limbe. They have burned and laid waste all the plantations. Their whole plan is marked with bitter resentment for former injuries, and the cry of les droits de l'homme, or human rights, is echoed through their camp. They still continue their depredations. Here we have a lively instance of the baneful effects of slavery, and I wish that America might add another laurel to her wreath of fame by leading the way to a general emancipation. As Secretary of State, Jefferson looked over Bowen's letter. He may have weighed, for the moment, in with a sense of introspection. Having offered a gradual emancipation as a remedy to the problem of slavery in the United States and seeing it all but erased from the American Constitution, Jefferson was warned to the idea of general emancipation. And this he kept to himself. Instead, Jefferson's approach to the progressive loosening of the French imperial grip on Haitian slavery was to maintain a position of ignoring the rebels' cause and demand. Indeed, Jefferson was not the only white man dreading the fallout of the insurrection. Every American, white, black, free, or slave, was in some way and to varying degrees aware of the catastrophe in St. Domingo. Jefferson, a slave owner himself, could not help but side with the planter class, while internally apprehensive of what might happen if that wealth of fame, born so poetically referred to, became a bed of thorns for the newly formed United States. The Haitian Revolution had waged on for 9 years by the time Thomas Jefferson wrote to James Madison in 1799. 2 years prior, he confessed to Judge St. George Tucker of the United States District Court for the District of Virginia that he questioned whether history would look back on the Haitian Revolution as a moment of divine atonement for whites. Quote, perhaps the first chapter of this history, he began, which was born in St. Domingo, and the next succeeding one will recount how all the whites were driven from all their other islands, may prepare our minds for a peaceable combination between justice, policy, and necessity, and furnish an answer to the difficult question, whether shall the colored immigrants go? Unquote. Then realizing that he fathered multiple children with his slave, Sally Hemings, Jefferson soberly and retrospectively acknowledged, quote, but if something is not done and soon done, we shall be the murderers of our own children, unquote. And by the time he became president of the United States in 1801, Jefferson's private and written lamentations of the Haitian Revolution alternated between sympathy, empathy, and apathy. As the last moments of the revolution closed and a French defeat was all but inevitable, Jefferson, Madison, Claiborne, and every white person from Boston to New Orleans grew increasingly worried that an influx of refugees would flood into the Louisiana territory and threaten American sovereignty. However, as historian Emily Clark notes, the migration of free peoples of color escaping Cape Francois in St. Domingo into Louisiana occurred in two stations between 1792 to 1804 and 1809, when 9,000 immigrants fleeing Cape Francis entered New Orleans, or Cape Francois entered New Orleans. Nevertheless, seeking to ease tensions while protecting the nation's investments in slavery, Jefferson proposed to crush Haiti's post-war reconstruction by stripping crucial Haitian commerce, prohibiting ships entry into and out of the island, and refusing to recognize Haiti's independence under Black leadership. So on January 1st, 1804, Thomas Jefferson and the Atlantic world had no other option but to acknowledge the rebels' sovereignty as the Haitian Revolution came to its decisive end. And in its wake, the United States was in a precarious position as no other slaving colony had ever defeated and ousted its overlord. The fact that the Haitian rebels gained their independence through a protracted military campaign waged over 12 years was mystifying and troubling. On the night before the insurrection, as Haitian voodoo ritual was performed by dozens of rebels in the densely wooded area of the northern Morne Rouge region of Haiti, southwest of Cape Francois, modern day Cape Haitien, and what became known as Bois Cayman ceremony. Present that night was Jamaican voodoo priest Dutty Bookman, Toussaint Louverture, Georges Biassou, and Sugar Master and Confederate of Toussaint, Spanish officer and slave Jean-Francois Papillon, also known as John Francois Petitcot. Juan Francisco and General Jean-Francois and Jeannette Boulet, the latter characterized as utterly remorseless, even towards his own kind, who found inspiration in cruelty, a sadist without the refinements that so-called civilization brings. An equally dreadful description of Boulet was a slave whose soul was perfidious and countenance was frightful and revolting. Boulet was described as capable of the greatest crimes, who was inaccessible to regret and remorse. Also present was Cecile Fatiman, a Mambo voodoo priestess. Fatiman, the daughter of an African slave woman and a white Frenchman from Corsica, provided over the voodoo ceremony during a torrential thunder and lightning storm. And as those gathered prepared for battle, Fatiman emboldened everyone to take revenge against their French colonizers. Extending her sharpened knife to the sky in preparation to slaughter a black pig in a ceremonial sacrifice, Fatiman and Duty stood before the insurrectionists and demanded they, quote, throw away the image of the God of the whites, whose thirst for our tears, and listen to the voice of liberty, which speaks in the hearts of all of us, unquote. Fatima was said to have invoked the Loa, no doubt for protection and success. The ceremony represented what Aisha Finch referred to as the concept of sacred accompaniment, where the one who calls upon the Loa becomes possessed and walks with divine presence. Most Haitian voodoo practitioners believe Fatima was possessed by the Loa Erzuli or Erzeli, as Finch further remarks. Most whites believed only a supernatural force could have contributed to the rebellion's success. And so, as I opened the mics of my beloved co-host, forgive me for the length of the story, I thought it was necessary. We want to remember, and Elder Reggie is going to remind us of our event soon coming up on tomorrow that we certainly invite you to participate in. A opportunity to fight against the beast, to fight against the machine, to bind and fight against all the evils and wickedness that we seem to be confronted right now in this present moment in time space in our country and indeed throughout the world. Greetings and salutations, Elder Reggie. Please do come on in. Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val, please do come on in. All is a blessing. AYIBOBO.
Hello,
Peace,
everyone.
Divine Prince. Great, great, great. Yes.
Go ahead, Elder Reggie.
Mm-hmm. Great show, Divine Princess, and those in the chat room. Hi, everyone. It was a great piece you read, Divine Prince.
It ran
Toni?
it ran a little long, and our time is really almost up. So, Elder Reggie, could you tell us about the event tomorrow and close us out for tonight, and we'll pick up Monday on this subject.
Yes, thanks, Sister Toni. Yeah, I'd like to remind everyone for tomorrow night ritual. If you're in the New Orleans area, please come out and support you with your prayers. The ritual prayer and application is on Saturday, August 23rd at 6:30 p.m. The address 710 Cluett Street. That's in the Bywater area. Practitioner and spiritual warriors come and fight the power. It's important that you show up and that we show out as a collective. With that, I say, lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. With that, we still must fight. But we fighting in prayers tomorrow and collective mind and thought. Please come out and support the event. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, AYIBOBO.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this right in my DNA, yet I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees. It's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise." Do you hear that sound? sound, it's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down.